I got into a little bit of debate with Democratic strategist Nomiki Konst. This is what went down when we got into a fight about free speech. Not only Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris put that out today. So my question for you is, should they now be deplatformed?
He called the people the Proud Boys, which is what I think they were referring to as Nazis, as very fine people. So let's make that very clear.
His words were literally this. No,
on the anniversary of Heather Heyer's death.
I'm not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis. His words were literally, as I just quoted, I am not talking about the white supremacists or the Nazis. He said those exact words. He was
talking about the Proud Boys, but we see them as the same people. So I would, you trust the FBI. I hope you do.
He didn't even mention
do you trust
Proud
the CIA?
Boys. That's you reading that in.
Do you trust the NYPD in New York? I mean, these are the folks who are there to investigate threats of violence. If you get in the mail, if you get a phone call, a threatening phone call, they investigate phone calls. The FBI looks into terrorist attacks. So why can't you do that on Twitter? The tech companies have an obligation to oversee this.
Well, then, according to that standard, both Kamala Harris's campaign. That's what a lot of people said to me on social media. Okay, that's good. That'll do. That was a debate about whether or not we should embrace the European standard of censoring free speech. Now, boys in New York, Alicia, there's a couple of takeaways from that moment last night on Fox News. First of all, my social media became incredibly active, markedly active. And I texted Tinfoil last night and I said, here's a couple of things that I want to learn from this moment. I think it's needed. I actually think we need to have more back and forth between left and right. I think that it's all too rarely represented. And I would like to pride myself as someone here, both on this program and just in my career at large, who's very, very open to that debate. And I felt like I saw that in my social media. Now, I will say there is a percentage of the audience that doesn't want to hear from an opposing point of view at all and will criticize me for bringing them on. But I think this is part of who I am and what I believe. The question is, should we invite Nomiki here onto the Will Cain Show? And I am not convinced on that answer. This is the second time I've had a debate with Nomiki. And I mean it as no huge personal insult, but there's a huge amount of crosstalk, and it feels like debating a press release. I am fire-hosed talking points. And I don't know that it is in the end productive. I don't know. Tinfoil, you grabbed a comment from somebody saying, thanks, I learned absolutely nothing in that debate. So I do wonder if we invite her into this decompressed environment here on the Will Cain Show, if there's a little less heat and a little more light in a conversation with Nomiki.
This is something I struggle with because I don't think a lot of people on the left are sincere in their beliefs. I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but it came across that way for her. Where it's like she just kind of repeats the same words. It's kind of like what I used to do when I was younger, and I would listen to right-wing talk radio, and I just repeat the same things I heard. And I think when we had a conversation with Destiny, that was productive. I don't know if it would be as productive with her.
Well, and the problem is when I talk about a fire hose, I will tell you, and the overwhelming majority of the commentary was positive. Good job, Will. You really handled that debate with some patience and the appropriate amount of aggressiveness. But there were some who thought I was not aggressive enough. And there is a quantity of points made that become impossible to rebut. Like the Proud Boys thing. That's just a falsehood. I don't even know what she's talking about. I mean, the debate at large was about whether or not we should adopt a European Union standard of more censorship, which does include cops potentially showing up at your door to arrest you for things that you say online. And I said to her as a rebuttal, well, then should Joe Biden be arrested? Should Kamala Harris be visited by police? Because both yesterday repeated the verifiable lie, fact-check lie, that Donald Trump praised Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people. She pivoted, you could hear Two-A-Days and Young Establishment James, she pivoted to the Proud Boys. But the Proud Boys were never mentioned by Donald Trump. So she just, I don't know, conjured that up out of thin air. She also, by the way, just fire hose stuff at me like, she mangled the metaphor, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater as a standard for free speech, which is not a standard for free speech. It's just not. It was mentioned in the Supreme Court case in like the 1940s. It was overruled in late 1960s, 1969 in Brandenburg, which was a Supreme Court case that set the limits of free speech as direct incitement to violence. But my point is, that's two things she said while fire hosing 100 at me, and I have to pick and choose my battles in 5 minutes on television.
Right, and it's really hard to talk over someone, and she was just saying the same talking point that you've heard and that you knew was nonsense.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like someone, and you see this a lot on TV, where they're not necessarily listening to the conversation and having a back and forth. It's more, I have these 4 or 5 things I want to say, and I'm just going to say them no matter what's said to me. I'd be curious to see if that would be different, if we could see how she came to those conclusions in a full conversation, as opposed to just what those conclusions are.
Count me as curious. That's a good word. I'm curious about a bigger, deeper, more relaxed conversation with No Mickey. And the reason why is I don't want my brain, I don't want my point of view to become flabby in the same way I'm talking to you about my workout. I don't want to not exercise. And the only way to exercise my point of view and my brain is by getting it challenged by those who disagree. I am not in the 20-30% that get mad when I hear something of disagreement. I actually consider it a good workout. And so I want to have that here. Maybe that's something we can accomplish with No Mickey, but we'll continue to seek that out. I will seek that out on the Fox News channel, and I will seek that out here on the Will Cain Show. But for now, let's dive into the subject. Let's get into the new embrace of censorship with story number 1. The new embrace of censorship is an old return to shut up. It's just shocking, I guess, to hear the honesty. The offending moment that has now shaken everybody back into authenticity is that Donald Trump appeared on a 2-hour Twitter space with Elon Musk in a free-flowing conversation, less of an interview in Musk's description and more of a conversation. The former leader of the free world and arguably the planet's smartest man spitballed ideas, workshopped our problems. And for a moment, it's worth just stepping back and marveling at what I just said. A presidential candidate sat down with arguably the world's smartest man, a guy who reinvented the car industry and pivoted towards electrical vehicles, who's pioneered private space travel, who's the richest man on the planet. Donald Trump took on a conversation, unscripted, no pre-vetted questions, and batted the tennis ball back and forth with Elon Musk. While it's been 24 days since Kamala Harris was confirmed the Democratic nominee for president, and 24 days without a press conference, without an interview, without a question about her policies, her past, or her candidacy. Nothing for Kamala Harris. That, simple side by side, is incredible. Now, in response to that 2-hour conversation on Twitter Spaces, the entirety, and if that's hyperbolic or a slight exaggeration, my apologies, but virtually the entirety of the approved journalistic media sphere, almost in unison, yelled, "Shut up." I give you Washington Post, a Washington Post reporter asking a question of White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre.
Elon Musk is slated to interview Donald Trump tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have in sort of stopping that or stopping the spread of that or sort of intervening in that. Some of that was about campaign misinformation, but it's a wider thing, right?
Yeah, no, and you've heard us talk about this many times from here about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but
that is the media asking for the heavy hand of censorship. What can you do to intervene, says the Washington Post, to stop this conversation? Well, a former Twitter boss writing in The Guardian had this to say. He wrote a column saying, if Elon Musk is not going to listen, well, one of the things we can do is break out the handcuffs. Here's the headline. As an ex-Twitter boss, I have a way to grab Elon Musk's attention. If he wants to keep stirring unrest, get an arrest warrant. Former Twitter boss saying, arrest Elon Musk for this type of conversation over free speech. That is exactly, by the way, what's happening over in Europe. Those aren't empty threats. People are being arrested in the United Kingdom over things they tweet or they post on Facebook regarding the riots they're currently experiencing over there in the UK. If you post something that is deemed inciting, if you post something that is racially insensitive, you can be arrested. You will be arrested. People have been arrested in the UK. And that's the type of approach to free speech that so many now on the left are asking for when it comes to America. And my question for you then is twofold. A, who's going to be the arbiter of truth? Who do you empower? Who is going to be the censorship boss? Who tells us what's over the line? Who tells us what's disinformation? Who tells us what's worthy of censorship? Who tells us what's worthy of arrest? Because here's question B. Should Joe Biden be deplatformed? Should Kamala Harris be arrested? The reason why is what I asked their Democratic strategist, Nomiki Konst, while filling in for Jesse Waters Primetime. Just yesterday, marking an anniversary, both put out a tweet, used X to say that Donald Trump called Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. Fact check, false. It's a lie. It's a hoax. It's disinformation. So, should they be arrested? Should they be censored? My suspicion is the answer to that is going to be no, because whoever you pick to be the arbiter of truth will be someone who has no interest in telling us the truth. Here's a good example. This is today on CNN a headline, or actually it's the New York Times. It's repeated on CNN.com. It's on your screen there. You can see New York Times. Hunter Biden asked State Department for help securing Burisma project in 2016. So just leave that on the screen. I want you to think about it for just one moment. It's now August of 2024, and the New York Times is reporting that Hunter Biden asked the State Department for help in securing a Burisma project from 2016. Now, for years, people on the right, people interested in the truth, people that work at Fox have been highlighting the dirty business ties between Hunter Biden and businesses in Ukraine or China, and offering up evidence, although circumstantial, evidence that Hunter Biden has leveraged his last name, his influence and connections within Washington, D.C., and possibly his relationship with his father as vice president and then as president to secure contracts to enrich several members within the family, several Bidens. That was dismissed for years with headlines like what you see on the left side of your screen from The Intercept, which said that suggestions of dirty business dealings within the Bidens is, quote, absolute nonsense. So, who's going to be in charge of telling us what is the truth? People that for 4 years told us this was absolute nonsense, and now that Joe Biden is no longer the nominee for president, are willing to step away from their propaganda and admit the truth? The only way to arrive at the truth is through unfettered free speech. And While one point of view dominates the entirety of social media, the entirety of tech, the entirety of the media, and the entirety of government bureaucracy, maybe we shouldn't be so afraid. And in fact, maybe we should praise one 2-hour unscripted conversation between a presidential candidate and the world's richest billionaire. A conversation between Donald Trump and Elon Musk.